This next storm system just keeps getting bigger. Let's take you out in the tropics because they're really starting to get very active out there. We've got two tropical waves that were actually coming off the coast of Africa, but the Caribbean is starting to light up with a lot of activity. And there are signs that some of this activity may shift back into the Gulf of Mexico late this week. There is our cold front that moved further south yesterday. That's going to be replaced with this dominant ridge of high pressure that's really going to be parking itself over the middle of the country. So all the instability is going to have to go up and over around this ridge of high pressure, and that takes us out into the Pacific, where we have Fernanda that's going out in the open waters. But what's more concerning is newly developed tropical storm Hilary. So that is a bona fide tropical storm. It actually just got named. And in fact, they're pretty bullish on this system. The latest update from the National Hurricane Center does in fact have it as a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm. But most consensus in the latest update has this all rapidly developing into a hurricane as early as tomorrow morning, folks. And this is going to continue to rapidly develop, potentially going into a major hurricane into the weekend. And look at the track, folks. That takes us up into Baja California as a hurricane. And yes, it could still be a tropical storm as it gets close to California, if not makes landfall into California. That would be an extremely rare feat. That's only happened a couple of times, but take you out into the Atlantic. There are those two systems out in the Atlantic. Both of these have a 50% probability of developing over the coming days. And yes, we have that other storm system with the high pressure going to be locked over the middle of the country. That's going to potentially allow some weakness underneath this ridge. And that's why we have about a 20% probability of this broad area low pressure trying to form into some sort of tropical entity in the Gulf of Mexico as we head into next week. So let's take you out in the Pacific, because there's the system going into this weekend as a hurricane off into Baja California. That's going to continue bringing very heavy rain, obviously high wind gust, and that's going to continue up into portions of Southern California. And the latest update, this is your ensemble guidance, folks, from the European guidance, has multiple members obviously keeping this continue to traverse right there, skirting the Baja California, and then actually skirting into California as well. So most even European ensemble guidance kind of has this, and that's why the National Hurricane Center has went ahead and, brought this potentially right near or inland, if not onshore, late in the period going into Monday morning. So here's the latest update from the GFS. In fact, even more bullish on the ensemble guidance, takes this into a powerful hurricane. I can't even roll this out being a powerful category 4 hurricane. By the time we get late into the weekend, the consensus is 120 miles an hour from the National Hurricane Center. And that's pretty rare, folks. I mean, they literally just named this and they're already saying, hey, this is going major hurricane just in the next 3 days. That's kind of rare to do. You don't see that out often, especially coming from the National Hurricane Center, that bullish, that quick, that out of the gate. So that is definitely concerning with this system, that it could still be strong enough, packing tropical storm force winds all the way up into Southern California as we head into Monday. That's a rare feat, folks. In fact, there's only been 4 times since the, in the last 100-something years that you've had tropical storm force winds from an Eastern Pacific storm into the United States. That's a rare feat. There's only been actually 2 storms since 1900 that's actually made landfall in California. There's been 1 hurricane that's known of on record since they began, 1858 hurricane that did make landfall as a hurricane in California. But that was a long time ago, folks. This is rare territory if something like this were to happen. And the National Hurricane Center actually has it potentially going into a tropical storm, making landfall as a tropical storm, 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm into Southern California. So if you take a look at the next 5 days, all right, so this is the kind of the summary over the next 5 days. Wow, some of the hottest temperatures of the summer is going to be parked over the middle of the country, while you have weakness on the other side. So you have a very active Eastern Pacific. And this Hilary is going to lift northbound and having all the instability into the desert Southwest and much of California, much of Nevada, while much of the rest of the country is just baking under that ridge of high pressure. The only weakness is further north into southern Canada. You might get some action in far extreme northern portions of Minnesota, maybe far extreme portions of Wisconsin into Michigan. And you might have some weakness down here into the Northeast and heading into New England. But other than that, wow, much of the country is going to be experiencing their hottest temperatures of the summer so far. So let's take a look at the setup going into Monday morning. Here's the latest GFS run. Has it down to a 988 millibar. That would be a weak hurricane, if not a very strong tropical storm right off the coast of California. And if we kind of zoom in, that the latest update takes it even inland as a 994. So that would be a tropical storm. So yes, there are definitely probabilities from ensembles from the National Hurricane Center that we could be looking at a potential landfalling tropical storm in California. If you can believe it or not, this looks to be coming to fruition. If it does not, it's still going to bring very heavy rain across this region. Here's the wind gust estimate. As the latest update from the latest GFS guidance has the wind swath coming through Baja California and then moving inland and packing those 60 upwards to almost 70-mile-per-hour wind gust into Southern California, portions of Arizona, as well as in Nevada, even continued with those 60-mile-per-hour wind gust. And the rainfall is pretty bullish. The consensus on the European guidance has those heavier rain amounts pulling into California, right? So obviously with the tropical system, it usually brings very heavy rainfall and higher wind gust, and that's exactly what's on the table for this region. So you could be feeling the effects even in the portions of Phoenix. These are areas that definitely need the rain. Vegas is going to get in the action with some heavier rain, and especially into Southern California. And depend on the exact track of this system, depends on where the most bullish totals are going to be inland as far as the rain estimates. Like I mentioned, the GFS is a little bit more bullish. It brings it a little bit more further inland. So if this were to come to fruition, wow, we could be looking at even some double-digit totals up there into portions of Southern California. And that would reach into portions of Nevada with just, of course, very heavy rain, across this region. But look at that, folks. This is your heat dome. This is your death ridge that some call it. That was the video yesterday. They call it the death ridge because you have a massive sinking area of high pressure over a large part of the country. And so whenever you have that, look at the weakness underneath. This is what we talked about. This is why the National Hurricane Center has highlighted that 20% probability. It could lift actually far enough northbound and highlighted over the upper Midwest with the most intense heat of the summer, allow some sort of weakness underneath in far extreme portions of South Texas, may actually shift and guide this system towards Texas, potentially even to South Texas, with some beneficial rainfall. So we'll be looking out for that system. But the reason why they call it the death ridge, folks, look at that. That's nothing. That's the next 7 days. Little to no rain, sinking air, hottest temps. It is impossible. That's why they call it the death ridge. Just a massive heat dome across a good part of the country. And that's exactly what's going to unfold. So it's going to push all the systems around that heat bubble and push it out to the west and at far extreme portions of Florida, and then far extreme portions up here in the Northeast, as well as into New England. But the rest of the country is going to be high and dry with the hottest temperatures of the season. Now, let's take you to the Gulf of Mexico. So here's the latest update from the ensembles on the European guidance. It has that weakness, right? So it's seeing that ridge over the top lowers the pressures underneath. So you've got lowering pressures. You got obviously well above average temperatures down here in the Gulf. And the shift is potentially going to be shifting it towards Texas. So how far inland it's going to go kind of remains to be seen. But the consistency lies right now, at least, you could be seeing, at least on the coastal regions, likely more out into South Texas, seeing some beneficial rains from this particular system. So if we extend the view, you can see what's happening here for a large real estate of the country heading into late this week, even into early next week, has that heat dome just parked over a good part of the country. And where that tropical system comes inland and pulls that heavier rain, obviously over time this is going to bring below average temperatures and much more comfortable air, and actually definitely much needed rainfall in this picture. But it's going to come with definitely some high winds on the table. And there's your rain depiction, right? So the consensus, some guidance is purely bullish, but if you add up all the members and you total it all out, the consensus pulls this further south. So if it is going to go into Texas, it's likely going to go into South Texas with those heavier rains and keep the heat ridge locked under that sinking air. And then that's the play with the West Coast rain coming back in the picture. You've been barely dry out here, so this is actually kind of a good sign in a way. Like I mentioned, it does come with some higher wind gusts on the table with potentially Hilary coming your way. And even if we extend the view, right? So we extend the view, it's still, as we head into that last week of August, it still has that ridge pretty much dominating with well above average temperatures over a good piece of the country. Only weakness is away from that ridge. Where the ridge is not locked in place, you're still going to have these troughs that come in and from Canada and pull into the Northeast and head into New England. So overall, Maine is going to be the coolest, probably the coolest state in town in the country out there up in Maine. So it's going to be pretty pleasant, and if not almost comfortable, if not almost chilly at times up there into portions of Maine. And there's the rain going into the last week of August, continues to remain where the ridge is under that high and dry, and where the weakness is and where you're going to have those systems, because the Eastern Pacific continues to remain pretty bullish, and I expected that continue to remain on the bullish side as well. That will send these systems out here off the West Coast, and then you're going to have that weakness out there. So where it's not rain, where the ridge isn't, that forces any precipitation around those areas. So that of course forces the rain out in areas that maybe hasn't seen it in a long time, and that is the West Coast. And that's exactly what you're going to do with kind of more of a major pattern change on the table, especially out west with those systems, coming in. So guys, look at that, folks. This is the consensus on the blend. This is the overall blend. So if you take the European, the Icon, the Canadian, the GFS, all those type of models, and you kind of blend it all together, this is what you come up with, right? That's your ridge. That's your sinking air. That's your heat dome. That's your death ridge, whatever you want to call it. It's heat and nothing is dry. So yeah, so that just means no rain, no instability, just a lot of heat and a lot of dry weather across underneath that ridge of high pressure. Underneath that, it shows the consensus more or less putting the heavier rains into the Rio Grande Valley, into South Texas, and obviously it puts the higher rainfall into far extreme into the West Coast, and especially into the desert Southwest. So yeah, so taking a look at the setup going forward, it's just going to be very high and dry across the middle of the country, and then wet. And we'll be watching those systems out in the tropics. We'll continue to update on this channel, so stay tuned to the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.